Welcome to this week's edition of the Reporter Roundtable here on the Red River Farm Network. I'm Don Wick, along with Randy Coonan and Megan Overby. Kara Hart on vacation, get an early start on a holiday weekend. It's been another busy week. Weather seems to be the common theme through many of the stories that we're talking about this week, including what's happening as far as what's going on with the drought and some of the meetings that have been taking place. Senator Hoeven hosting some folks from USDA this week, 4 different meetings across the state. Megan Overby, Megan, you had a chance to be at one of those. Give us an idea what was the feel of those meetings?
Yes, so they certainly covered a lot of ground this week, starting in Mandan, going to Minot the day or that afternoon, actually, and then yesterday. They were in Carrington, which is the location I was at, and ended the day in Argusville. So they really got to see a wide swath of the drought that's impacting North Dakota. And like you mentioned, Don, bringing in 2 administrators from USDA, Zach Duchenau with the Farm Service Agency and Richard Flournoy, who is with the Risk Management Agency. And of course, crop insurance is going to be, well, it has already been a talk amongst some of this poor crop across the state. And so where do I begin? You guys are going to have to help me through this process because there's a lot to talk about. But after the Wednesday meeting in Mandan, I talked with Sterling, North Dakota farmer, and NDFB board member Lucas Lang. He reiterated a lot of the stuff we've already been hearing as we gather news for radio. You know, those crop insurance claims are top of mind, as well as some emergency haying and grazing and flexibility with that process for cattle producers. One thing that he did mention that's kind of specific to the area is USDA staffing. One farmer in the crowd made mention that he waited 9 months for his operating line of credit. And so while we are thankful for the staff at USDA, and I don't think anybody envies the different programs that they've had to try to learn over the past year and a half, you know, he just wanted to stress the fact that, we need to hire quality staffing that is, familiar with agriculture and can do their job. And it just makes the process go a little smoother. So that was one point at that Mandan location made. At yesterday's discussion in Carrington, a variety of groups represented, ranging from Durham and wheat to soybean growers. And of course, the cattle and sheep folks were in the room as well. I posted this on social media, but these were just the takeaways that I gathered by sitting in the room that day. So right now, ranchers are concerned about the quality, or rather the quantity, not the quality of forage. That's why they really are pushing for some flexibility with CRP haying and grazing, as well as with crop insurance. If there's crops that have to be, zeroed out, if you will, or destroyed because they're not going to come to full fruition, they're maybe looking to get something on that ground to keep it productive, or even just to get a cover on it, come fall. So that was top of mind. Emergency livestock disaster programs like LFP and ELAP have already been triggered. One point that Duchenau made was he would like to see this process streamlined because, for example, like with the livestock forage program, that's supposed to cover 60% of feed costs for that producer. And well, if they don't have that money, how are they, supposed to secure these feed sources? And so, as I mentioned too, crop insurance claims are already being filed specifically for that spring wheat crop where it just didn't get the moisture, didn't have good emergence. And it is, guys are throwing out yields like 5 bushels per acre. Obviously that's not even worth harvesting. And so the one hiccup people are running into is several farmers are stated they're waiting on the adjuster to come out so they can do something with those acres. Of course, if you've ever filed a crop insurance claim, you know that you have to leave strips of that crop until the adjuster can get out there. And one rancher mentioned, okay, so if I have to leave strips every 40 acres, I can't graze that wheat. I can't do anything with it. So one little hiccup they may be running into in places. And, really, farmers and ranchers, the big thing they're worried about is what's to come. We've been in dire straits for how long. They know we're in drought. They know it's not getting better overnight. But the $1 million question in the room was, what is the long-term plan at FSA and RMA? Not even being tough on them. They just want to know. They want answers. If these drought conditions do persist rather, what does the future of emergency programs look like? If we use them once, yes, that's fine and great, but that concern of drought into 2022 is a big 500-pound gorilla in the room, if you will.
Well, that's even too, Megan, looking at the lingering effects, even if the drought would end. You've got cattle producers reducing herds, no crop, no seed possibly for next spring. So it does extend into 2022 already, I would think.
And as you mentioned that, Randy, so Jeff Schaefer with the North Dakota Stockmen's Association, he's at New Rockford, North Dakota. He's a farmer and rancher and cattle feeder. So he has a lot going on his operation. He shared that he had oats that were intended for seed production. He's actually already taking those oats out of seed production, that seed production line, and he actually has already cut and baled them to feed to his cattle. So things like that are happening. And, like you said, it is all a trickle down effect, into next year.
Do you get a sense of urgency when you hear from the folks from USDA at this meeting with Senator Hoeven?
If I had to say one thing, this is the first time I obviously have met both Administrator Flournoy and Ducheneau. I know we've talked to them over the phone in the past, but they are both really personable people. They sat there, they listened. I feel like they truly did hear farmers and ranchers. And of course, Ducheneau being a rancher, from South Dakota, he gets it. And, both of them use the phrases, pardon my ignorance, but, there's just some things they flat out didn't know about. But think about the territories that they have to cover in their job. Agriculture is so diverse, not only in our state, but across the whole nation. And so they don't know about it until they hear about it from farmers and ranchers. One thing I thought was interesting was Administrator Ducheneau, he shared his email with people. He goes, folks, send me an email. He goes, it may take me a few days to get back to you, but he goes, I check my own emails and I personally respond. So I think they really are that listening ear in the room, and they don't know until you tell them. So that's my big encouragement, is you need to let people what's going on your farm and ranch. Very
good. Switching gears, taking a look at this crop. Randy, you and I were out on Tuesday for Crop Watch, ended up in Washburn, North Dakota, but we saw a lot of ground in central parts of the state. Herdsfield seemed to be kind of the center point where the crop was in really tough shape when we were at Terry Weckerly's farm.
Yeah, that's for sure. It seemed like when we started here in the valley and then worked our way west, it just kept gradually getting a little worse and a little worse. And then by the time we hit that Herdsfield area, the center part of the state, it's dire straits there. And then even over by Washburn, the dryland areas look really tough. Again, there's some irrigation over there, and anything under irrigation, they've been able to keep the crop going and keep up barely the way it sounds. But for the most part, yeah, that center part of the state here, and then runs north to south, and it kind of dips down into that southwestern part of the state, I understand too. So it's a large area that's having trouble with crop, and it's not just the spring wheat. I mean, the wheat is small grains. Everybody says pretty much done. It's gone. Most guys, I think, are afraid we're going to get rain, so it'll perk the crop up, and they'll have to maybe run a combine over it because, Megan, like you said, they're talking 5-10 bushel an acre crop there out of that wheat crop. That's not worth running the combine over. Not only that, but can you get it in the head? I mean, we were out in the fields by Herdsfield there with 6-inch tall wheat that's headed out. Some of it's still flowering at the same time and filling the grain seed. And that grain seed is no bigger than what would be normally go through a sieve and be sieved or screened out as screenings. So there's nothing there as far as that crop goes. So it's really a tough situation out there.
We saw cornfields where there were some parts of the field with corn was waist high and others where it was 6 inches tall, like in the same field, I can only imagine it's going to be a mess to deal with at harvest time.
And not only in the same field, but within 6 feet of each other. It just, this seed found moisture when it was planted. The one right next to it, 6 inches away, did not. And it came up when it finally got some moisture. So yeah, it's going to be a tough, hard, and it's going to be the soybeans. It's going to be the corn as well. How do you? You're going to have to run everything through a dryer, I suppose, and you're going to see some light test weight corn because of that. And then if you happen to throw a frost in on the end of it here in late September, October, look out. This thing could get wild.
Yeah.
I'm
I
sorry.
have a question for you, Randy or Don. So, we talk about some of this crop that isn't looking so good, but there's still a little bit of crop out there that maybe has a chance. The corn and beans, if we can get some timely rains, that it may stand a chance. Did you see any of that within the past couple of weeks of crop that maybe wasn't so bad, planted on wetter ground? It doesn't look too bad.
Well, even out in that area, in the Hertzfield area, Terry Weckerly had made the comment that this is all crop that had crop on last year. Anything that was on PP ground that did not raise a crop last year looks fairly decent. It's hanging on. There's enough moisture there to get that crop going. There's the whole key. When we stopped and talked with the tops at Grace City and Weckerly, and even over by Washburn at Clark Price's place, all of them had said they've never had a problem getting a crop out of the ground before. This year they did because it was so dry. They just couldn't get a stand. And that's the whole issue, is even these crops in that center part of the state, like the soybeans and the corn, they're just behind. I mean, they've been in the ground since late April, early May, some cases with soybeans, and they're 2, 3, 4 inches tall. They should be a lot further along than that, but it was so dry that this crop's just not growing. It's just kind of conserving as much moisture as it can.
And I think it just depends what your zip code is and which cloud you're under. If you caught a rain or two or not, and it's really, that's what everything's depending on at this point for most of our guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's switch gears to that crop report. We've been looking for the acreage numbers for some time. We got them from USDA this past week, along with the stocks report. Numbers were a surprise to the trade. They went up, but certainly not to the extent that the market was looking for, Randy.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere along the line, we're missing about 3 million acres, and that likely is going to be some prevent plant acres. And also maybe some abandonment. To USDA maybe fudging some of the data into that a little bit. But that's the whole thing too, is the traders are really kind of not believing these acres. They want to see the production, I think now, more than anything. But yeah, corn acreage at 92.7 and soybeans at 87.6. And we were expecting at least 93.1 or 93.2 as far as the average trade guess on corn. And that soybean number was closer to 89. So that's your 3 million acres there, give or take a few. But the trade, I think, is going to be watching production here now. It makes weather extremely important here for production, because right now we still need trend line yields to come up with enough bushels to meet our demand. And right now, with I think what did Andy Schisler told me yesterday when I talked with him from S&W Trading, 33% of the U.S. soybeans are grown in drought areas this year. That's North and South Dakota, Minnesota, Northern Iowa. And he said, normally you put North and South Dakota by themselves, it's not a big deal. Even Minnesota by itself is not a big deal. But you throw Iowa in with that, and that now we're talking something that could impact this market big time.
Well, in North Dakota, our acres are record large, 7.2 million acres for soybeans. But just like we've talked about with this weather, it all depends on what we're going to get through the combine at the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too, is our acreage is way up here in both of the Dakotas because of the lack of prevent plant this year. And I think that's going to be almost record small as far as the crop that got in. The big question now is how much is going to get abandoned.
So we've got a WASDE report, supply demand report, coming out pretty soon here.
Yeah, and a week from Monday, on the 12th, we got the next crop report. Typically not a big market mover. This one on June 30th was the acreage numbers is usually the big one. In this report now, the USDA will plug in those numbers from that June 30th report and look at ending stocks. Most of the trade is expecting USDA they're thinking they're going to have to lower ending stocks here in this on this WASDE report, but it's USDA. Who knows?
But you could sure see that when that acreage report came out at 11 o'clock on Wednesday, because boom, it just
Oh
it
yeah.
skyrocketed.
Yeah, it was fun to watch that market screen go because all of a sudden we were talking limit higher moves. Never quite got there in the soybeans, but corn shot limit up and just kind of locked there and stayed there for a better part of the day, at least the front 2 or 3 contracts anyway. But yeah, and that's the thing too with this trade. It's all done computerized, so they're looking at what's based on average trade guesses, and the computers don't see that, so they trade. And there's no emotion, nothing. It's just all mechanical, and those big swings can happen.
It's not like the days of open outcry in the pits at the Chicago Board of Trade.
It's fun to pick Tommy Grisafi's brain and talk about what it's like in the trading pits and stuff, and just the emotion. You know, when you talk with him, you know, he said, you know, who's making the trades, why they're making the trades, and it's just kind of fun to see that. And that's something that we've lost here with the computerized trade.
No doubt. Well, as we talk, we're looking at a day in the 90s and more hot weather coming this weekend. Megan, what are you hearing in this forecast? What growers expect?
Mhm. So, while areas of the Northern Plains caught some random rain showers last weekend, we know with the heat that we've seen this week, that moisture that was accumulated in places didn't last long. And so I guess the 7-day forecast, I had to backtrack here because that's as of Monday when I was making my notes. But the chances for rain are few and far between here. Again, just those random pop up showers. Your neighbor to the north got an inch and you got nothing. So temperatures, of course, we've seen on the warm side here, reaching into the 90s. Some 100s are even expected over the weekend in southern portions of the Northern Plains. And so, of course, any moisture that's left in that ground is going to deplete pretty quickly. And so in an SDSU Extension webinar, state climatologist Laura Edwards said over the past 30 days, so most of South Dakota has received less than 25% of average precipitation for this time of the year. We know April through June are quote unquote our rain months. And so a lot of people are worried moving into July and August, where we typically don't see as heavy of rains, if you will. And so obviously this weather forecast is not favorable to start out July for areas already in drought and areas, where drought is intensifying. It seems like parts of South Dakota and Minnesota had some relief right away. They had good rains at planting time, but really haven't caught a whole lot since then.
There are some adjustments in that drought monitor. South Dakota actually increased in some of the more severe drought categories, and that abnormally dry area in Minnesota also expanded. So, and it shook up a little bit in just the area in North Dakota, just because of where some of the spotty rains were. I was on the phone with a farmer from Indiana this morning, Brad Downing. He had told me a different story. The last 2 weeks, he's had anywhere from 4 to 8 inches of rain on his farm, and never more than an inch at a time. So it can rain out there. we can see some good conditions at some point.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm talking to the market analysts too, and they're saying there are northern Illinois is a little bit dry on the drier side. They've still got a decent crop, but not a bin buster. But you go into that southern Illinois area into Indiana, it sounds like those guys down there are talking 250 to 280 bushel corn, some of the best crops they have ever seen down in that area. So there's a big area. Then you go a little further and they've had areas with too much rain. So we've got some flooding and some drown out spots. So we got, it's kind of all over the board here this year.
So next week, you mentioned Tommy Grisafi from Advanced Trading. The last 3 years, so this will be the third year where we do our boots on the ground tour and take a look at what's going on in a particular area. And we're really at the center of that here in North Dakota this year. So Tommy and I next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 7th, 8th, and 9th, we're going to be hitting the road, traveling through a large portion of North Dakota that's dealing with some of the most severe drought. We know what's happened with wheat, kind of a train wreck out there, but what's happening yet with corn and soybeans in this very volatile market situation, it's going to be good to get some firsthand experience and perspective on this crop. So we sure encourage folks to tune in for that.
2 years in a row, even in North Dakota, and different extremes. Last year it was prevent plant.
Yeah, and now we go to too dry. We can't scare up a rain. So always looking forward to those trips, and chance we'll have stuff here online, social media, and of course right here on the Red River Farm Network on our 21 radio stations. Those are some of the stories we're looking at this week. That's our Reporter Roundtable, along with Megan Overby and Randy Kuhn, and I'm Don Wick here on the Red River Farm Network.